12-footer, if he's old enough to paddle, which he looks athletic and he would be fine with it, start with a 12-footer. My nephew has one of my 14-footers and he's 12. He does great with it. So, make those little short ones and it appeals to people. I'll get it for my kid and then the kid doesn't like it because the 10-footer doesn't paddle very well.
So it has a tendency to go back and forth instead of track? Or?
Yeah, it swings. Even like the boats I have down there, 14.5 feet, stays nice and straight, but the 12-footer in the same model, you make one stroke and feel the back end turn. With every stroke, you feel it turn a little. It's really bad when you get a boat under 10 feet. It's just really zigzags on the back. So 12-footer is usually fine. There's enough boat to touch the water. So that's what I would look at for him.
How heavy is typically a 12-footer?
12-footer is probably 55 to 58 pounds. Get to a 14-footer, you're usually talking 65 pounds. Those are 14.5-footers down there. 165 pounds, 171 pounds. They're the same boat, but there's extra fittings for the second feet, for the second seat. That's the weight difference.
Bill Jackson?
That's 13.
Yeah.
Go down there. Check it out.
Yep. Good kayak department.
Where is Bill Jackson's sporting store?
Yeah.
Outdoor outfitters and everything.
Yeah.
Pretty neat store.
For where?
For you going across from the base, just go across Gandy. When you get to 19, make a right. It's about 1.5 miles
Right
on the
before
right.
you go over the first overpass, you'll see a sign in the woods.
Bill Jackson's in the
First time
woods.
you go, don't take a walk.
Don't hit no palmettos either. Miss Jackson will take you out.
It's right on the right. There's an old Army Jeep out there with 2 kayaks on top. It's the big stand of trees on the right. It's just past the Howard Johnson's. Pull in there, go through the trees. So they have everything. They have hunting. They have the fishing department. They have the kayak department.
Diving,
Scuba,
classes.
indoor pool. So camping stuff, hiking stuff.
Do they ever use that lake back there? Or do they have access to it? Or?
Yeah, they unlock the gate. You can go try out the kayaks in the lake. They have demo days there on the lake.
They have a firing, they have a shooting range there.
Yeah.
Great gun department.
Through the slow time in the economy, that gun department kept them going strong.
Is that indoor range, outdoor range?
Indoor,
Gun sales has been so good.
indoor range.
Who's got to shoot it?
You know, I don't know. I haven't done it. I'd have to ask them. I know a lot of people do it. Everything at Bill Jackson's costs a little more. I don't know about their shooting fees, but they also carry really good stuff. Like this place carries really good stuff. It's not like you're going to Walmart or something. You're going to pay a little more for stuff because you're getting better stuff.
And they do sales occasionally. They'll
Yeah.
have big scuba blowouts. They'll have snow skiing blowouts.
Yeah.
All right, I guess let's get it off the hill here. 6:35. I think we got a couple of other people coming. But
We'll update.
I'd like to thank all you guys for coming, and Neil's done a couple of kayak seminars for me, does a great job, and teaches some little tricks that you probably didn't know about yet, unless you've been doing it for years and years, and still probably teaches some tricks. He's also the site administrator for Captain Mel's website.
Okay.
If you ever want to contact him, Lively Baits.
Lively Baits. That's my nickname on there. I'm a kayak fishing guide. I recognize you. I've seen you 4 or 5 times over the years. Yeah, good to see you.
Denise said hello.
Excellent.
Denise Bruner from the Fly Fishing Club.
Fantastic. I'm a local kayak fishing guide. October makes my 6th year that I've been taking people kayak fishing. And, my trips are instructional, so I was talking to him a little bit about what I do. And then for this here, what I told Vance I would do would just kind of be an all-about kayak fishing session. And how many of you here have a kayak already? How many of you are thinking about getting a kayak? I know you guys are.
Whose ass is 1 inch too wide to fit in the kayak?
See, that's actually funny about that, because I got the one sheet here that says myths about kayaks, and one of the big ones is I'm too big or I won't be comfortable in a kayak. That's simply not true anymore. With the changes in what they've done with fishing kayaks in the last 10 years, you now have boats that are a combination of layout, performance, and comfort that never existed before. And a lot of that impact was from my feedback to companies back when kayak fishing really started to take off. And there's a multitude of factors on why kayak fishing gained a lot of strength inside the fishing world. It is the largest growing segment of the fishing industry. Kayak fishing is. Part of that's economics. People don't want to pay to store a boat, they can't afford the fuel of a boat, different reasons that they look at this as another way of getting on the water. It's a one-time investment. Like we were talking about you getting kayaks. Once you have everything, I tell people, you know, I'll put the rod holders on. The only other thing I didn't mention to you was the anchor trolley system. That's a pulley system, that's for positioning. Other than a rod holder, that's the most important add-on that you can do to a kayak. You're at a seated position and you're at water level. So if I'm seated in my kayak right here, the water's right down here. So your goal with kayak fishing is to try and as much as possible comfortably face forward when you're doing your fishing. So it's either the wind or the current that's going to affect on anchor which way you're going to face. So for what I'll try and teach people is as much as you can, get upwind or up current, whichever is going to be most dominant of where you think the fish are. You drop down your anchor and then you trolley it to the back of the boat. It's going to swing around and face either straight downwind or straight down current. Now, number one, you're making long casts with the wind. You're covering more water. But you're also, most kayak anglers, they want to use lures. You can always use bait as a backup, but one thing that's you have a real advantage with in a kayak, you can get closer to fish and you can use a lot lighter lures which have better action. Once you've mastered the lures, you can outfish your friends that are using live bait in a lot of situations. But if you're straight downwind, the other advantage is the amount of wind play on the line doesn't affect the action of your lures as much. So you make a good long cast downwind. So that's the positioning and the anchor trolley fast to that. So that's just a little rigging part of it. You know, the simplicity of kayak fishing, and for around here, what's really noteworthy, we have better water access here as far as kayak fishing than other places around the country or around the world. I've covered almost every inch of Tampa Bay. That's because there's so many launches that are they're just convenient for doing this kind of fishing. If it's a public place and it's a break in the trees and there's a place to park, that's a launch. So water access isn't difficult, which is important because there's sacrifices to kayak fishing. The biggest sacrifice is speed. You're not going to get anywhere fast. I'm a strong paddler and I can paddle a little bit faster than everyone else, but I take people fishing, I'll say steady and smooth. We get there when we get there. Part of what you learn your tides and you learn your areas where you're going to fish, and you set up point A to point B to point C. It's kind of like this, instead of point A to point B to point C. If you're slower in how you're moving around on the water in a kayak, you want to have a better plan so when you're bouncing around, you're making shorter trips so you're spending more time fishing and less time paddling. That's a sacrifice. But the biggest advantage, you know, you're low to the water. You're very quiet. You're able to get to these fish. The only way that you're not going to be quiet and you're gonna ruin the advantage of the kayak. If I had an anchor here, I did bring a stick pin from down there to show you. You go to pick up your anchor and you bang it on plastic there when you're getting it out. Any redfish that's within 20 yards, it's gone. They're very sensitive to noise. So if you have everything planned out and you're efficient, at the launch, you get your anchor out, you have it clipped off to your trolley, you have all the rope out, and you have it in a position where you can grab it, lay it in the water without banging it on anything. Where this is important, if you're just setting up on a place and you're just going to start fishing and you say this is going to be good, that's not a problem. But a lot of things where I teach people to most efficiently cover the flats, find these fish and catch these fish, stay on the move as much as possible. If you have light winds and you're able to set up a drift, you're going along, bam, you hook up to a nice redfish. While you're fighting him, if you can reach down, pick up your anchor, quietly drop it down, trolley it to the back, and you may have to take little breaks there to reel up a little line if the fish swims towards you, because you always want to keep a tight line on a fish. But if you can do that, after you've caught that fish, the other ones are still there. But if you hook that one fish and you let him drag you through there, it's going to spook the other ones off that same flat. That's the difference between catching one fish or multiple fish there. This one right here, perfect example. This is another anchoring option, the stick it. So I'll have mine out, and there's a clip on here that'll be clipped off to my anchor trolley. So I'm hooked up to a fish, and I'll show people this. I'll hook a redfish when we're out there, and I'll say, watch what I do here. And I'll be reeling up a little bit, and the fish starts pulling a little bit. Now I've got time, I can hold the rod like this, I can pull this out, stick it down in the mud, trolley it to the back, redfish pulls the boat tight, I fight him up, catch him, go back to fishing for another fish. So right there, that's one big thing. If you found a redfish, there's probably more of them right around there. So if the water's shallow enough where I'm doing it, I've had times where I've forgotten and my anchor's in the back of the kayak. If I have a fish hooked up, I'm not going to really be able to get back there and get it. If the water's shallow enough, I've stuck my foot over the side and stuck my toe down in the mud to hold me in place. And that's enough, you know, it's whatever it takes to keep those fish from dragging you through the other ones is kind of a big deal. The only thing, no maintenance on these. Once you own a kayak, you're done. Your expenses are done except for your tackle, your fishing rods, and anything else that you're buying for your trips.
That's only in the thousands of dollars. Your expenses are coming.
But that's part of the fun. The toys are still part of the fun. And as a sponsored guy, it's actually easier to acquire more toys without watching the bank account go down as much. But
if you've ever owned a outboard powered boat, you have to register it, and you have to have a trailer, you have to register it. So yeah, the expenses on anything beyond a kayak really get up there quickly.
The kayak itself, there's one thing. I mentioned the anchor trolley system. I bounce around a lot. The only thing that can wear out, and it'll take about 4 years, is a little piece of bungee that's on there, on that trolley system. Other than that, there's no maintenance on it. The trolley's on those boats. When we get done, we'll go out. I'll show you the boats. We talked about maybe hoisting one up here, but I figured it'd be just as easy. I could show you down there. No, it's that simple, and there's nothing that rusts on them either. You get done fishing, you have your boat, you have to do 15 things when you get home.
You gotta flush the engine, you gotta wash it.
You gotta recharge batteries.
You gotta wash the trailer.
You had wiring or something that wasn't right, you have to check that. No, it's done, and you don't even have to wash them down. There's nothing that rusts on them. I wash everything down that touches salt water, but my actual maintenance time after a trip is probably under a minute and a half.
How do they do for exposure? UV rays?
I went to long sleeves and long pants about 4 years ago, and wide brim hat, and then I put sunscreen on like it's cake frosting. The other things that go over your face, I never really wanted to do
But
that.
on the kayak itself, they're storing them?
He's saying does the UV rays bother?
It used to. The way the plastics were 6, 7 years ago, you'd buy this $20 bottle of aerospace protectant called 303, and you'd spray that on there every 3 months, and it would bring the exact color back. The way they make it now, they don't even fade. The color it is when you buy it now is how it looks. It's going to look a little different on the bottom, because it's going to be all scraped up and scuffed up from oysters and dragging it across sand and pavement and whatnot. But no, there's none of that maintenance either.
We just got kayaks 2 weekends ago. We don't have enough room in our garage, so we're keeping them in the backyard, just with the tarp over them. How about just the heat of the sun? Like, does it like
Heat can be a problem if you don't have it laying in such a manner. There's certain things that can happen with them. They call it oil tanning, where the heat going on the inside of the kayak and everything. If you have it not centered, or even worse, if you have it upright, it's down there on the
upright.
If you put them upside down, they're less likely to have any warmth.
Okay, but they can warm.
Yeah, they can. Mostly they don't. But severe heat situations, if you have one upright,
Yeah.
the bottom of the hull will actually change position with heat. But
Mine has like a little, right underneath, it's almost, I feel like it's the softest part of my kayak. It's not, nothing like that, but it almost has a little, from the person that I bought it from wherever she had it sitting on, whenever I got it, it's got that, just a little hump, where it had actually worked, but it doesn't change
you
how
tried boil,
it
yeah,
runs.
if it's not a big deal and it doesn't affect anything,
Yeah.
no big deal. But you can always boil water and put that on a towel and drop that on the inside there. That heat down there will actually reform it back to the original.
Okay.
So you can do something like that if you ever have any.
So the best way would just be lay it flat. We have ours standing up now, so just lay it flat, upside down.
Upside down is usually better.
Okay.
If you have it laying right on the gunnels of that boat, upside down is usually better for storage.
Okay, and we have 2, so one on top would work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or if you have the room side by side is sometimes better, but the form of the kayaks, it's almost like stacking chairs. One
Okay.
on top of the other usually does pretty well.
All right.
Yeah, but it's the big adjustment. Everything's from a seated position, so a little different from everything else you've done in a boat. Mostly you're standing or you're in a chair where you're up a little higher off water level. So one of the big things from a kayak is the adjustment of being close to the water. This is a big thing I teach people. And I start out, they're throwing lures, so reeling the lure in, they get a weed on it. They reel it up to where there's this much line coming out of the rod tip. And so now they're going like this. From a seated position, if you stop reeling when you have about 6 feet of line out, raise the rod tip up like this, take the weed off right in front of you. So building on that, just eliminate reaching. It makes everything, you're trying for efficiency. You want to do everything fast. Get that weed off and get another cast out there. But where this is really going to help out, now you've hooked a fish. This is going to save you money on servicing your equipment. Now you've hooked a fish, same thing. You have them played up, and if there was a powerboat guide in here, he would just gasp when he hears this. You have that fish ready to play up. Raise the rod tip up high to where you can grab the leader. If you do that on their boat, they're going to scream at you because it's high sticking, and if the line gets around, one of the guides up there and the fish takes off, it may snap the blank. But from a kayak, your pendulum point's lower. You're right here along the water. I've never had anyone get a loop when they're fighting a fish. And from there, once you have the leader, you can now set your rod down right between your legs here with enough slack to use both hands. If you reel up too much line, for those of you that have kayaks, check yourself. If you're ever going like this, you're going to be dunking your reel at some point. So try and keep a little more line out. I mean, if you reel up too much line, then you get a hold of it. It's tough to do with one hand, but with a spinning reel, you could flip the bail open then and lay it down, but you're achieving the same thing with extra effort. You're getting that extra line out there. So check yourself on that one. If you can stop reeling when that fish is right there, and then you can move him to where he comes this way, and still have enough slack to set your rod down here, you're not going to dunk your reel as much. I'll see it on almost every kayak fishing video made. These other people landing a fish, they're supposed to be the experts. I'll see reels go in the water, and I'll see them reach them backwards. These are things, if you learn it, it's just that much easier on your gear. And it's easier overall because you don't have your rod going across your lap and everything else. Your rod, with enough slack, is laid down in a position where it's not in your way. So that's a little tip. And that's one, when I'm out on the water with people, it sounds like I'm giving a lecture, but I'll say, ah, you reeled up a little bit too much line again. It's better. And then toward the end, usually they have it down. And it's just stuff to make it all easier. Choosing the right boat, that's kind of what I was telling you guys. Some of the people that have boats, sometimes they get a starter boat that they don't necessarily like as much. You can always sell the kayak and put that money towards one that you do want. Bottom line is, if you can, get out and try kayaks. Most of the people that do that with me, they have a hard time buying anything else because there's no more comfortable seat than the one that goes in those boats down there. And that's what it came down to when I was selecting boats, you know, between different manufacturers I was talking to. This company came down. I was already really jazzed about that layout because of all the stuff I could take along. They set one on the ground, they put the seat in it, I sat in it, and I said, I'll take 4 of them. And they had 4 of them on the truck for me already. And it was comfort because I knew I was going to spend a lot of time in that boat. You're going to pay a little more for comfort, but if you're going to fish a lot, you want the boat that performs the best for you. But to be able to sit in the boat and feel good in it for long periods of time, there's nothing better than that. Some of my other kayak fishing school themes. The 4th Thursday of every month, I do a seminar at Bill Jackson's. I've got a pretty strong following. A lot of my former clients come to that. And they all kind of laugh because they always see this sheet here. It's my cheat sheet just so I don't forget anything, and it's my themes. Things that are going to make you the best kayak fishing angler, or even for that matter, the best angler. I have people that come to my seminars that have no interest at all in ever getting in a kayak. They want to hear what I have to say. And I talked about the one before, no anchor banging. Or don't be an anchor chucker. When you get there, if you throw the anchor, unnecessary noise. The water's right here. Lay the anchor down there. Long casts, I already mentioned. Getting control of your lure. This is a big one. This one will lead to more fish right away for you guys. I see almost all the pros do this, but I don't hear that many of them talk about it. You fire off a long cast out there, and lure hits the water and 2 seconds go by and then click. Then you're bringing it back. That lure's already down in the grass. But the number 2 factor where you've lost out, if that lure landed within about a 5-yard radius of where there's a feeding fish, you might have heard it and looked over and there's nothing there because the lure's laying down in the grass. An occasional fish might see it and go over and grab it right when you start moving it. But if you can simultaneously, and I always say, this hand's doing nothing. Make a long cast and you know when it's about to hit the water. Your rod is pointed this way, this hand's doing nothing. Reach over, click, knock the bail over, and raise the rod tip about that fast. That takes all the slack out of the line. So I was demoing this 2 days ago with these ladies that I had out there. We caught trout and then we moved in for redfish, and I said, this is what I taught you back at the launch, and here's where it's more important. You have to be aggressive. Shallow water with eelgrass. You're going to get those weeds on that lure faster. You don't want that lure to hit that. Plus, if there's a redfish right here, I may be able to get him to eat before I even touch the handle of the reel. So I said, watch my hands and everything I do here. So I made a long cast, the lure hit the water, I clicked the bail over right before it hit the water. I raised the rod tip this far, and then rod tip went thump. And so I reeled down just to get a little more bend in the rod, and I set the hook. And so I caught a redfish that big, and I only touched the handle to reel down a little bit on it to get a positive hook set. I said, if that was you guys casting here, and you let it splash down and you didn't have that lure on the move, your odds of getting a strike from that fish went way down. I call it putting that lure to work for you. But it's big for keeping the grass off. The 3-inch paddle tails that we were using there, I like using those on a regular jig head with an exposed hook. There's other longer tails that I'll use that, quite honestly, I'd rather have them rigged up on a weedless jig head anyway. But be ready to do both. Use that little one with a conventional jig head and practice it. See if you can keep it off the grass. It's all what I call pace. It's right on there too. 12 inches of water or 12 feet of water the habits of the fish that we have around here, they're usually feeding within this far of the bottom. So if you're fishing real shallow water like this for redfish, you're almost in the zone anyway, no matter what you do, but you don't want your lure running real fast up here. And what you really want to do, using an 1/8 ounce jig head from a kayak, to me, is your best option. 3-inch paddle tail, I use 12 fathoms. DOA cowl tail, almost the same thing. These paddle tails are almost all used the same way. You click that bail over to get control of that lure. I move the lure with the rod tip. A lot of people just reel it straight. I use the rod tip. So I'm moving the lure about like this, and you watch, I'm cranking every time I'm dropping the rod tip. And what I'm doing there, after redfish that could be in water this deep to this deep, by doing that, I'm going at the minimum speed possible without that lure ever hitting the grass. Is that important for other species? Not necessarily. But for redfish, I'm convinced that the difference is they're digging down in here, they're looking for shrimp and crabs, so they're like this. They'll sense that lure swims by. And if you're just doing it like this, and that's got it going on a pace like this, it's right above the bottom like this, they may turn and look over, but at that speed that it's going, they may be this far away from it. And they go right back and go, where's that crab I was looking at? Now, if you're doing it my way, and you've slowed it down where it goes by them, and it may be the difference if it's only this far away from them, that's in their strike zone. That's close enough where they're like, forget that crab. Pow! They'll hit it. So, I took my lure sponsor fishing about a month and a half ago, and his good buddy, both of them pretty good fishermen. I caught 6 redfish, neither one of them caught any. And I kept telling him, I said, try and see if you can do it like me. This water's hot. This was in Upper Tampa Bay, and there were some redfish around, but they were not necessarily that cooperative because it's summertime. In the dead hottest part of summer and the dead hottest part of winter, it's the same thing. You want to move that lure even slower. And biggest fish caught last week was when I actually set my rod down. I don't know if my phone rang or what it was. I set my rod down, and so I was talking to the guy that I had with me there, and I was telling him, it's going to take it slow. The sun's up high now. It's going to take moving that lure real slow. Went and picked up my rod, and there was a trout on it that was about 27 inches that ate that lure when it was just laying down there on the bottom, not moving. So that tells you something. About 5 years ago in the wintertime, same thing. That one was the phone rang. I was out there at Fort DeSoto for like 2 hours. Hadn't even had a strike. Lures in the air, my phone rang. I was expecting a phone call. I was just out scouting that day. So I put the rod in the rod holder. Was on the phone for a little while, got off the phone, and I had a trout on there. Pretty nice trout. Went back and I thought, okay, they're in here now. Went back to working the lure nice and slow right above the bottom. About 20 minutes later, I thought, well, try it this way. Cast it out there. If it's sand bottom, it's even easier to do this. Cast it out there, let it hit the bottom, and then I moved the lure about this speed here. I was just dragging it across that sand, caught another one. Has to be that slow in the heat of summer, or like the last 2 winters we've had. January of 2010 and December of 2010. If you're going to catch anything, it's got to be slow. They're cold-blooded. They will not go a long distance when it's that cold to get a meal.
What kind of day would you fish on the other end?
It's a mix right now. It's about 50% night trips, 50% morning trips. The ones I've been talking about have been the morning trips.
Morning or 10 a.m.?
Oh yeah, 10 a.m. We're about wrapping it up by then. The fishing's been best from about 6:30 to like 8:30. By like 9 o'clock, if you have a good tide, the fishing may still be good until about 9:30. But by 10 a.m. it's about shut down around here. It's that hot. I call it the sun high in the sky. If the sun's right up here, you're at that time where it might be time to load up and go home.
And night fishing, what time are you going then? Middle of the
Depends
night?
on the tides. It's probably, I like the sundown thing. what you have with tides in the summertime, you'll have a lot of low tides that are somewhere in the region of sunset time. It may be 6 p.m., it may be 9 p.m., but I like an incoming tide in the summertime. I like those outgoing tides in the wintertime if it's been cold. In the summertime, all that solar heating on the flats, if you have an outgoing tide, that's all superheated water that's moving out. It also probably has less oxygen. So I would rather wait and say, we'll launch at 7 because there's a tide switch at 6:30. Then there's mixed water coming in from the Gulf. A little more oxygen in.
You find a real advantage in carrying multiple rods? Another question is feel more comfortable out there with a shorter rod, 6.5 feet, 7 feet due to the mangroves, getting all that, having a lot of...
Oh, definitely. There's this right here. I should have just brought one of my rods in, but this is almost about the same length of fishing rod. So from a kayak, when you're selecting what fishing rod you're going to have, 6.5 foot would be the shortest I would want. 7 foot is almost what I have exclusively on mine. I can get away with a 6.5 foot, no problem. And what the issue is, you have a fish on and you're in the kayak. When you have him right here in front of you, he could go either direction. Can you get your rod tip? Can you negotiate the bow of the boat? So you want a rod that's long enough to get over the bow of the boat. As far as dealing with trees or whatever, there are areas where you may have to lay the rods down. Try and do that in front of you where the rod tips aren't going over the sides of the kayak. I would try not to do it behind you. A lot of people I know lay them down behind them. A tree will grab it, they'll hear a splash, not even think anything of it, and the tree made nature claim one of their rods. What was your other question?
Multiple rods.
Multiple rods, absolutely. I take, on average, I take 7 rods with me. But I'm a guide. I may have 2 people out there with me. So what I'll have is, I'll have that 1/8 ounce jig head with the paddle tails on rods, usually on the client boats. They're using that a lot. I'll have 2 other rods that will have weedless jig heads on them. Other people will like doing stuff, gold spoons, topwater lures. I always have those. That's a situation if I really want to employ one of those. I'm usually clipping and tying something else on. But it's all about efficiency. It's faster to grab another rod and use a lure that's different than the one you have. If you're using a natural bait as a backup, like a live bait or a cut bait, you can have 1 rod rigged for that too. So it's all about saving time. My seminar last week at the store was on efficiency. If you need new leaders on, you should be doing that the night before. Especially this time of year, when you get out there, you want to go and you want to fish it hard. If you're fishing it, you're launching at 6 o'clock in the morning, you want to be fishing by 6:15. You want to hit it hard by 8:30. You don't want to be tying knots. You don't want to be clipping lures off and tying a different lure on. So yeah, multiple rods, big advantage. Another one is you never know, one of yours might melt down too. The biggest hazard is someone who takes 1 or 2 rods with them. If they have a reel that freezes up on them, if they have 1 rod, they're done. If they had 2 rods, now they're down to just using that 1. So if you have a couple more than that, then you have a little bit more flexibility.
You could have a guide go on one of your rods, and now it's going to cut your lines. And
Yeah.
the second rod.
Yeah. The other thing I would suggest, like I've got my crate. It has a 6 rod holder system on it, and has a bunch of storage in there. In one compartment in there, I think I have 7 spare spools. And I take people fishing that'll create tangles more than I would myself if I'm fishing. So what I'll do is, they tangle one up, I take that rod and I hand them another one. I'll look at it. The thing about braided line is, it twists, but it also untwists, and to me it's a fun puzzle. I won't cut line. I simply won't do it because I like a clean spool of line, fully spooled. So I may put that one away. If it's a bad one, I may put it away Or I could, if I can, and I can get it off there, I could switch spools if I really want to keep using that rod. I've got the spare spools to do it in there. But I'll get home, and we put a timer on it one time. I think it was 48 minutes and a 6-pack of beer, and I got that one undone. But if you don't pull anything tight, you can usually untwist everything that twisted and get it out again. But it's another good reason to hold multiple rods. You get one that gets a huge bird's nest, put it away. That'll be a project to fix when you're at home. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm glad you brought up the rod length on it. How many of you own really short rods?
Yeah.
6.6 is acceptable. A 7-footer is a little bit better as far as negotiating it with that fish close to the boat.
I have both.
Yeah.
I have a question. Once you see our birdie fishing up there. Like what you said, I was drifting, and then I have my anchor like that. But once I caught and finally got it in, it was a struggle, and then I tried to go back and find my spot where I was at, and of course I couldn't find it. And it takes 2 hands for me to position my anchor, because I've tried, I literally have, got the handle on the top, and I'm having to stab it into the ground for it to hold. Of course, the current was a little bit strong that day.
For the clients, I'll only put these on the boats if we're fishing specific areas, and those areas will be muddy bottom. If it's
Hard sand.
if it was hard sand,
Right.
if you're over there,
It was just right there.
if you have the other anchor, a 3-pound claw
That's what I was
anchor
going to ask you.
is what I
if
use.
that would be appropriate, because
Yeah.
I ended up, because the tide was pulling me, I ended up grounding it and putting my kayak against it so that I would quit pulling it up out of the sand, because it just kept, every time I would.
Now there's some areas I go
Yeah.
hard sand. I'd almost have to get out of the boat to get one of these to go in there.
That's what it felt like.
Oysters is another one where a regular anchor works better.
I think the 3 boats out there. My idea of fishing on using a pack. I've seen pedals, I've seen electric motors now on the leaf. What's your idea? What's your thoughts on it?
When you add in some of the pedal system boats, now you're talking moving parts and stuff that may break.
You get stuck down there on the grass.
Yeah, they can. You're also talking. I take people for redfish a lot. So you're talking redfish. If you're in water that's any deeper than this, you're minimizing your chance of catching redfish. So if you have, like in the native brand, that boat that's down there, the Ultimate, they came out with, they call it the Propel system, and they brought that down. This is a few years after I first started using this boat. So they rigged it up and showed it to me. They said, "Do you want one?" And I said, "No." They designed a boat that will not work in the shallow waters where I go for redfish. I'd be retracting it all the time. I could use it for part of the time when I'm moving around, but I sacrifice all the space where I'm tilting it in and out. The other ones that are the Hobies that have the flipper things, those will sit up against the bottom of the boat. I never really was interested in those because of the weight of them. That thing is a tank. I want to be able, since I lift them every day, sometimes several times a day, I want something that's manageable to lift. I'd rather paddle than pedal anyway. The hands-free thing, some people really get into that and like it. I like the paddle boats better. But it's certainly an option. The people who get those, some of them have shoulder injuries, or maybe some other thing where upper body strength is an issue, and it works for them. Me, my preference is one that paddles.
More expensive too.
Yeah, it's a premium. You're talking
Yeah.
60 to 80% more in cost than it is for one that's a paddle boat.
And I got one in the lake.
That's what you have. Yeah.
Going with. It's a tank. And so I put it in the bed of the big paddle. No way can I get that.
And that's an acceptable way. I mean, me with the minivan, I've got the native. Another propeller one is the Mariner. I have one of those. It's on a trailer. There's no way I'm I'm gonna put that up on that roof rack. So, yeah, pickup truck bed or a trailer are the options if that's the type of boat that you want to have.
I don't see that.
Yeah. On fishing rods, another one. Your fishing rods that work with the live bait may not be that acceptable. In fact, it's not going to work if you're trying to throw those lures with what's the one? I did a seminar in Panama City a year ago. I said, how many of you have these things? Ugly sticks. Because we were talking about lures. We had all these lures laid out there and talking about it. How many of you having trouble catching fish on lures? Every hand went up. So Joe starts talking. I said, well, wait a second, Joe. And I said, how many of you here use ugly sticks? And every hand went back up. And I said, go throw them in the garbage can. Everyone, they love their ugly sticks. And so I said, all right, don't go throw it in the garbage can, but leave a live bait hook on that and go into the store here and buy a graphite rod. I use St. Croix rods. The difference between something like, one of those rods that those people were using and a really nice high modulus graphite rod, I can feel that lure the whole time I'm using it. I can tell you if I have a weed on it that's that big. That's because of the rod.
I'm using the St. Croix for both lures and live bait. Any disadvantage to that?
No. Which model do you have?
Geez, I don't know. I bought them here.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, I looked at everything they have here. No, there's no problem at all with that. But if you had something like those ugly sticks they have, that's like fiberglass. Cause
So they have a solid glass tip. It's a composite rod with a solid glass tip. Plus, it's going to be more flexible. You're not going to get the hook set you
Yeah.
do with it.
But the big thing is the lure feel. Your St. Croix versus one of those, because while I was doing that seminar, the guy who owned the store ran out and grabbed one of those things. And I brought it in, I had my rod and their rod, and I went, and that one was going, boing, boing, boing. It's not going to have the same feel. Now, there's different actions and power on these things. That's kind of a personal preference, but I like something that isn't super stiff. Rod tip will move a little bit, but not so much where it's really wavy.
Is that fast action then?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm using. Fast action medium weight.
Medium power, yeah. That's exactly what I have a variety of them, but if I go and grab one and I go like this, that's the one I want. That's exactly the one that I like. So that's consideration. If you're having trouble with lures, evaluate your equipment. The rod is the biggest thing. I mean, I've got people that they're like, it costs a lot though. I'm like, do I catch more fish or not? He said, what about the reel? And I go, put a $40 reel on it. But mine are like $160 reels, but I said, put a $40 reel on it, take care of it. That rod is what's most important when you're using those lures. So people that are having trouble with that, so I'll tell them when they book a charter with me, I'll say, bring your gear. You're probably not going to use it, but I want to see what you're using. Because then I can make a determination of why they're having trouble. And a lot of it could be stuff like the rod is too heavy for the type of fishing they want to do. The rod's just bad. The line's too heavy. There's different things, but you've got that real advantage. You can get close to these fish. You can go down there and you can pick out the ugliest lure. Figure out Neil won't be able to catch anything with that. I bet you I can. From there, once you have your kayak, you have your equipment, you get to where there's feeding fish. But Captain Mel used to say, you gotta fish where the fish are. Pretty simple. I can take the most ridiculous lure down there, and you'll probably see me if I'm doing that, which I've got a couple of new ones to demo for me at the lure factory. You'll probably see me dragging it in the water like this, doing different stuff with it, watching how it goes. And then I'll make a cast, and if there's feeding fish there, I'll probably get a meat, no matter how ridiculous that lure is. Back to that, I jump around a lot. 12 inches of water, 12 feet of water. The zone where you're going to catch those fish is within that far of the bottom. So it's pace. I mentioned 1/8 ounce lure several times now. If you're fishing 12 feet of water, you probably want to move up to a 1/4 ounce lure. If it's me fishing 12 feet of water, you'll probably not see me change lures. And you'll see me cast and you'll see me sit there for about 4 seconds. And then you'll see me bring it back real slow. With the heavier lure, you could work it a little more and it may still stay down there. But that's your thing. How much current? If there's any current involved in 12 feet of water, the 1/8 ounce isn't going to work. Unless you're casting up current and it's getting down that way, you got to go with something heavier. But the point is, you can catch your fish down here. Unless you want to catch ladyfish or mackerel. And if they're there, you can move at whatever speed you want. But if you're after trout, which is a big one in the deeper waters, the bigger trout could be in the shallows where the redfish are. In the wintertime, I'll have that. Be catching redfish, and then all of a sudden, bam! Oh, it's another redfish. Well, I don't think so. And bring it up, and it's a huge trout. In the wintertime months, the biggest trout will be right in where the redfish are. So those are things, habits of the species. If I've got people fishing with me, and a lot of times if they don't have any confidence in lures, I'll start them out in a spot where there's trout. Go out there. That's a quick way to get confidence in lures. But what I tell them with trout feed differently than the other species. They have these big fang teeth. They actually use that to kill their prey before they eat it. Anyone here know that already? So if I've got my 3-inch tail here and my hook's sticking right out here, trout comes up, squeezes down on like here trying to kill it, he doesn't have a hook in his mouth. I teach people not to set the hook. I won $50 on the Captain Mel tournament, which I hosted. I placed a bet that one of my clients would win the trout category. And when that came through, this guy I bet with, he paid up and he said, "What'd you do? Tell him where to fish?" And I said, "No, I don't even know where he fished." He said, "Well, how'd you know one of your people would win it?" And I said, "Because I teach people the way to catch more trout and bigger trout. And what you have, you're moving that lure nice and slow right above the bottom, keeping it down there where they are. A lot of times they come up and squeeze on it, so I'll raise the rod tip. And then start reeling. The rod tip will bend and bend and bend. A lot of times, whoop, he'll let go. I'll drop the rod tip, count to 1, go back to working. I call these second chance trout. Now they think it's injured. When the rod's like this and they let go, lure comes up and away from them. But if you train yourself to stop, drop the rod tip, that lure actually flutters back down. They'll come and attack it a second time, or another one will come and hit it. But if you're setting a hook on those, all you did was pull it away from them. Pull it up. If it has that lure in its mouth, if you're using a sharp hook, the hook's going to set anyway. But times where seems like right after sunrise, a lot of times these trout aren't super aggressive. You have these soft strikes for a while. But my people will catch them when I hear other people saying, "We couldn't get any of them, we were getting the strikes." It's because you teach the people to just keep it down there, and eventually they'll keep jabbing at it until they finally get the hook in their mouth. And then usually 45 minutes later they get more aggressive. And there's some times where they clobber it, but you'll know it, the strike's different. A lot of times with trout it's just like a little bit of weight added, and those are the ones that may or may not have the jig head hook in their mouth. There's other times where you feel those ones are hitting it hard enough where the hook's probably in their mouth. And what I do, if I feel that, instead of setting hook, I just start reeling fast. Reeling fast, and the rod will bend over and I'll have it. I still like that better for a hook set than setting a hook on them. You could, but you'll miss them. Anyone know the other species that I tell people to fish it the same way?
Snook,
I set the hook on snook.
flounder.
Flounder. Flounder's the other one. Flounder's the only reason to own a landing net, I think. As far as I'm concerned. From a kayak, a redfish never touches a net, a trout never touches a net, snook never touches a net. Flounder, a lot of times you'll have them on the way up there, and you won't see the lure and you'll be like, "I've got him good." Well, the lure's in there sideways like this, and their mouth is so hard in there, the hook's not stuck on anything. First time they open their mouth, the lure flies out, and you're like, ah! Big flounder swimming back down to the bottom. From a kayak, you know, I don't usually have the landing net with me, so this woman that caught this 18-inch flounder last month, this thing came up, and so I got over there real fast, and I went like this, and the flounder came off the hook, and I went like this and whacked it into my boat. Landed it that way. But I was ready for it after losing so many over the years. So, but flounder's the other one. Trout and flounder, if I'm fishing them, thump, comes to a dead stop. That's a flounder. It's like you hooked the bottom. You hooked a rock or grass. Raise the rod tip. Don't assume it's a rock or grass. And just raise the rod tip and start reeling. Coming towards you. It's either a big old hunk of something on the bottom, or it's a nice flounder like this. You'll feel the rod tip starting to bob. Same thing as with trout. If you feel them let go, drop the rod tip. They might attack it again.
And you're catching flounder on flats?
Usually it's in deeper areas near a pass. Bunce's Pass down by Fort DeSoto has been the most consistent flounder spot for me the last couple of years. South shore of Tampa Bay. I've got one spot back before I was a guide. If there was any tournament that had a flounder category in it, I'd go down there, and it was about 7 to 8 feet deep. Sand patch surrounded by grass. I almost always got like a 20, 21-inch flounder out of it. But yeah, if you have areas of high current, sand and grass mix, or sand with some kind of structure, maybe rocks feeding sand, and bait fish. I like it where there's some kind of food source.
You demonstrated an e-hook from a kayak, a bass, snook, a redfish, and a trout without them banging themselves to death on the
Yeah.
kayak.
It's technique. Everything you have going there. To me, de-hooker tools work a great deal better if you're using live baits in a small live bait hook. To me, the best way, if you're fishing exclusively for trout, you might take your pliers and bend the barbs down on your hook. That's going to make it real easy, especially when it's the nice little ones like this. All you have to do is drop the rod tip in it. If you can see that jig head in any part of that lure, drop the rod tip, the lure usually just falls out. From a kayak, if you're bringing trout up and it's one that you know you're going to have to handle, I think it's a lot easier on the trout if you do not use pliers. You do the same technique. You get it up here where you can land it, and you raise the rod tip, and that trout skirts right up to the side of your kayak. Okay, you grab a hold of the leader, set your rod down, stick your hand down the water, wet your hand, and then you go around and you can grab the fish. Or if there's a lot of that jig head showing and you can see it's in the soft part of its mouth, I won't even worry about the wet hand thing. Once I get it down, get a hold of the leader, I'll slide my fingers down the jig head, and I won't even shake it like that. If you lift it like this, gravity takes them off there. Redfish, you could probably stand on their head to take them off the hook, and you're not going to hurt them. But same thing, I'll bring them up, and once you have a hold of the leader there, I'll get my hand underneath the belly like this. You could grab them on top too. I'll wet my hand too, even though they don't have the slime issues trout do with removing them and have a bacteria problem. But once I have a hold of them one way or another, then I can just take the hook out by hand.
Can you lip a redfish?
No. I do, but you look, my fingers are all scarred up. You know, they've got enough tiny little scratchy teeth on there. And they've got, I mean, they chew on rocks and crabs and other stuff. You don't want
the
the
fish gripper or boat grip?
I've got the fish grip, and I'll when it's I have people getting their picture taken with fish, I'll put them on that. That's one way for them to control a fish. Use the other hand to support the fish. But otherwise, when it's me and it's just a fish that's going to be let go, I won't utilize the gripper. Snook, when I get them up, I'll handle them in the water, thumb and forefinger, take the hook out, and then let them right on go. If it's fish that doesn't need to be revived, it's dip them, pop it out, let them go right on the way. Bigger one that needs revival, I'll get out of the kayak and then I'll just slowly walk them. I call it figure eighting them. I'll just kind of walk them around. And this time of year, hotter water, you could have snook fatalities if you're targeting snook, and particularly if you fight them too long. Quite simply, there wasn't enough snook around this year. I took them off. I'm not offering snook trips this year. Number one, I don't want people to go out and not catch anything. But I do know where some are, and I thought the spawn probably important enough to not, put any extra pressure on those fish. Spawn was successful for sure down south. I saw spawning activity up here, but even looking at that, you're looking at how long is it going to take this class of fish to get to that size to where we have the numbers coming back. So I still see several years of recovery. They'll come back, but I want to do my part and not accidentally kill any. So not targeting them. You know you're going to catch some on accident. Anyone want to take a guess on how many my clients and myself have got combined in 2011? 9. Not even double digits on snook this year. And I've been fishing out. I've been fishing out near Hurricane Pass 4 days a week, pretty much all years. Even since the time where they're normally out there. And if they were there, I'd be seeing big schools of them. There's some there, but it's a recovery period. They'll come back. But
Have you ever had porpoises, bottlenose come after them in the kayak?
rarely. Certain areas, there've been some porpoise that are a problem with that. I've had some that acted like they were going to and didn't, but no, not a huge problem. But I'm hearing that more and more. Areas, Fort DeSoto, I think if I stayed where I was a week ago and we were catching fish there, I think those porpoise would have been eaten. But we moved, so I don't really know.
Dang cormorants are as bad as the porpoise on trout.
Especially Sarasota Bay.
Like diving ducks, man, they'll sit there and eat everyone you want to throw back.
Sarasota Bay is the worst I ever saw
They'll sit
that.
under your boat.
We were just there.
Question for you. You were talking about Hurricane Pass, and I'd like to ask you about fishing spots. I've been going, got my kayak about a month and a half ago. I've been going consistently out to Five Spot Picnic Island and been doing really well there. Can't, at this point, can't motivate myself to go anywhere else. But I would be interested in trying to target some different species and catching redfish. Not many trout, but I'm really interested in when I go there and focus on redfish. But with the kayak, what other species can you target, and what about the muppet? I'm new to the area, so I only got here last November. So I don't know. I'm still in my first year's experience fishing in Florida. But in terms of taking the kayak out and targeting some different species, maybe sheep's head when it's the right time of year, or I've never caught a cobia. I don't know if you can catch one from the kayak.
You can, but cobia is usually an accident because you're so low to the water. You usually don't see them. I'll catch cobia about 4 times a year. We'll get cobia, and they're usually eating something else that's hooked.
And pump it out.
It's usually a silver trout, a whiting, or a speckled trout. And it's usually near a pass. And I think the last 3 times it's happened, it was a silver trout, which don't traditionally jump. I've learned when they jump, there's a cobia after. So no, it's if you see big stingrays around, switch to a really long plastic tail, because there may be cobia with those. But you'll see all the people that do cobia fishing, as far as the powerboat guys, they've got the tall towers, so they can see them from a distance.
Areas to catch pompano from the kayak, can you do that?
Yeah. Fort DeSoto, the bridges around Fort DeSoto. In general, I'll send a lot of people 2 different directions to catch pompano. It's a little different. Go jig them up off the Bay Pier, Fort DeSoto. Go jig them off the North and South Skyway Piers. or go on someone's boat and go fish Gandy, Howard Franklin. To try and do those in a kayak, which you might be a little different because you've got your hands free,
Right.
but you're talking some higher current. But you may be able to do that. What you don't want to do, you don't want to go drop an anchor and fish it that way. High current, your anchor gets caught in the rocks there. If you're smart, you dump your anchor and you just end up losing an anchor. But that high current, if your boat is attached to Mother Earth by a rope and that current's high enough, your boat will submerge. So, hands free. You said you've got one of the Hobies.
Yeah.
You may be able to do that. You could launch from the St. Pete side of Gandy, and then you take you guys sell Silly Willies here, or Doc? Yeah, Silly Willie. Silly Willie's what I use. I know Captain Joe used to sell it, yellow Silly Willie with a pink teaser, and get them right on those pilings, all the way down on the bottom.
You can do bunches fast too. Even pull up and beat your boat and wade.
Yeah. Bunce's is the place I was catching them 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And you can launch there by the 35-cent bridge. You pay the 35-cent toll. 20 yards down, you make a right and a little break in the guardrail there, and then you just go due west. And you can fish right there in Bunce's. Just go past. You could do a flounder pompano combined trip.
Oh, I'd be interested in that for certain, yeah.
Because right there by Sister Key, which is right inside the mouth of Bunce's, there's deep sand there. That's one of my flounder holes. If you don't get them there, and you get your pompano and you still want to flounder, when you get back to the launch, cast that any light colored area right by the launch. Flounder in there too.
And what kind of words are you using for the flounder? Just the jigs?
I use the 3-inch 12 fathom mullet.
Okay.
But any 3-inch paddle tail is going to work the same. You know, we can walk down there and look at what they have here and pick out some stuff for you.
Super. I'm always getting a little tired of eating redfish.
Yeah.
Oh, boo-hoo.
But I bet you're not tired of catching them.
I'm not.
Redfish is my favorite to catch.
Absolutely.
But pompano put up a huge paddle too.
Oh, really?
They hit hard. They take off good. They're a lot of fun.
They're jack. All
Yeah.
jacks fight hard.
But they're a good tasting jack. To me,
Oh, yeah.
pompano is the best tasting fish in the Gulf.
Really?
I love pompano. But you don't need any natural baits for them. Use that yellow Silly Willie, and I like the pink teaser. Other people like the white or yellow teaser. I like the yellow jig, pink teaser combination. If you're fishing the bridges inside the bay, you want it right down there around the pilings or under the bridge. Doesn't necessarily have to be on the pilings, but if you're under the bridge. Out there in the passes, you'll learn your areas where they collect, but they move around. But pay attention where you hit them and what your tide is. High tide switching out, going, you'll find them in one spot. Incoming tides, you may find them in a different spot on both the bridges and the passes. So pay attention where you get them and what the tide is.
They also hang around some of those racks in the bay where you're fishing.
We're going
They're
to.
basically crabbing.
Yeah, I've got treasure fishing.
Yeah.
So they're either
Not all
after.
of the racks, but some of them. I don't know.
Yeah, sand fleas is a bait you could buy for them. Fiddler crab's a bait you could buy or go catch for them. But I won't do it. I'll use that Silly Willie. If I find them, they'll eat that. And anything that keeps me from reaching down and baiting a hook is what I like to do.
It's hard to keep bait.
Yeah.
Messy.
Yeah.
How about range of line weights that you have on your rods?
15 pound.
15
All of
pound? Okay.
Right. Yeah, 15 pound braid. I do have some 6 pound fluorocarbon main line. It's a Seagar or Brazex, and that's kind of nice if you got trout rods. I like keeping a couple of those spools around. If someone's having a real hard time using braided line, I'll switch them to one of those spools. But otherwise, no. If it was just me fishing, I'd be using 6 to 10 pound braid for all the fishing I do. But to me, the 15 pound is a little more forgiving. If I have to untangle stuff, I like that little bit more body to 15 pound that I can undo some of those twists with.
Do you use like a pin or a tool of any sort, or are you just picking that with your fingernail?
I've got a little awl tool, but I only need that if something got pulled down fairly tight. But otherwise, usually you just start twisting, and then you end up separating stuff, and then pretty soon you'll see where two of the pieces align. If you push it forward, it'll go through the center of the problem there, and then the whole thing comes out. But yeah, a little tool like that's good to have. I don't know where mine is now, so if I need one, I'll pull out a brand new jig head and I'll use the tip of the hook and do that too.
What size,
Sorry.
what size leaders do you use?
In a regular year, the weight leader I'd be using right now would be 30, because I would have people catching snook along with also the trout and redfish. But since snook really hasn't been an option, it's all 20-pound leader right now. If you want to buy just 1 leader and feel pretty safe with it, 25. But if you're in areas, if you're going out to Fort DeSoto, like he might go try and do pompano, a bunch more bait fish just arrived, so there's probably going to be more mackerel around. You're almost better going back to 30 again, and not losing a lot of jig heads, because if the mackerel are hitting, you can get in mackerel when you're jigging pompano off the piers or in the passes. And after you've lost a couple lures, then you're thinking, I may need to upsize my leader. So 30 usually works. 40 is even more dependable. If I'm doing sole mackerel trips, I'm using 40-pound fluorocarbon.
No, you're not doing long shank hooks or...
You could. You don't need to, but if I'm fishing for mackerel, I'll do that from the Skyway Pier a lot, and I'll use that same pompano lure. And I'll just jig that down there. I'll usually do it higher in the water column, but no, I don't lose that many of those lures.
When you say the Skyway Pier, are you take your kayak, or are you just going out on the pier?
I used to go out and paddle out to it, but I just drive out there.
That's a big current.
If I'm after pompano or mackerel, and I'm going out there, I'm just going to drive up to it, catch my fish, and drive off. But I used to make that paddle out there. See the look on people's faces. That'll die.
So always a leader?
Yeah.
Always a leader? Okay.
Your leader is your length of invisibility between your main line and your lure.
Okay.
That braided line's very visible. Could you catch fish with no leader? Yeah, you probably could, but you're going to catch fewer because a lot of them are going to see that line.
Gotcha.
What knots do you use in your rig? Do you double braid, or do you just tie straight to the bottom?
Mine's a combination of 2 clinch knots, and one of my clients nicknamed it the Neil knot. And the first attempt at videotaping it didn't work out. It's simple. It's a simple clinch on the. I'll start with the leader, and I'll do 3 twists and go through. And then I'll take the braided line through there. And then I'll take that first tag end, and I'll start spinning it anywhere past 8 times. And then I'll go through that first loop, and then I'll pinch it with my fingers, and then I'll do a full clinch. I'll take it back up through the big loop.
Improved clinch.
Yeah. It's as strong as anything else I've ever done, and people have put me on a stopwatch. I can tie it in 11 seconds.
Do you have that on Mel's site?
No.
By chance?
I'm going to get still photos first, and I'm going to have instructions with still photos, and then we're going to try the video thing again. And then once there's access to that, if anyone wants on my email list, then they'll know when this is ready. You get one of my cards, send me an email, and I'll add you in. Then the trick to it will be look at it, study it, and then try tying it. And you may have some problems, then go back and look at the photos again. Some of it has to do with how you hold the line, and it takes a little practice with your fingers. Some things you want to hold a little looser, some things you want to hold a little tighter. And once you figure all that stuff out with your fingers and figure out your own method, which is what I talked through in the video that didn't come out.
So instead of taking the tag end and wrapping it around, you're actually grabbing the line and spinning it, or twisting it, and getting your loops that way?
What I'm doing to get the loops,
Or the
I do
wrapping
the first knot on the leader.
Mhm.
That gives me grip.
Okay.
So then I run the braided line through that top loop on the leader knot. That's what I tell people when I get that first part done on the leader. I'll say the knot's half done. Then you run your braided line through there, And that first knot that you did on the leader, that 3-4 turn knot there, that gives you some grip. So with my thumb and forefinger, I'll start spinning it. And you'll see the braided line spinning here. Get it anywhere past 7-8 wraps, you're good. Go back through again for a full clinch. And I call it massaging it down. I'll massage it down with my fingers, clip the tag ends. Simple.
You have time for a few more questions?
I do.
I'm maiden voyage, fishing voyage tomorrow with my son with the new kayaks. And so we're thinking of Port DeSoto. So where should we go? Where would you go for tomorrow morning?
I would stay near the pass. I'd go fish that Bunce's area. It's
If I hit the flag, would I go left or right? No.
You don't get to the flag.
Beforehand, after the toll?
20 yards after you pay the toll, make a right.
Okay.
You're gonna launch down there at the base of the bridge.
Before we go to the,
Yeah.
Oh,
that would be
so pay the toll.
Yeah, it's not much detail though.
It's not the boat launch. That's before the toll. After the launch.
boat launches after the toll.
After the toll.
Yeah, I think it's right.
Yeah, so Tarpon Key. So here you are on your way out to Fort DeSoto. Here's the bridge. You're gonna launch right here.
Okay.
The toll's right before that. So you pay the 35 cents.
Yep.
And then you stay in the right-hand lane because you go 20 yards down, and there's a break in the guardrail, and there's a little path that goes down to the water.
Okay.
So then you unload your kayaks there, and you're gonna be right here. You can go right across to here. See that grassy area there?
Okay.
You know, Sister Key's the little island that's right in front there.
Alright.
If you go just to the west side of Sister Key,
Okay. So this is the camping area here.
the camping area
Right
is
there?
across the bridge. The camping area is right here.
Okay. I see. So we're
There's
gonna
the
get off
bridge.
here.
Yeah, you're gonna launch right at the base of the bridge,
Okay.
and then you're just gonna go straight across.
All right.
You're right in front of Sister Key here, deep water. Your redfish will be up somewhere in here. I don't know what the tides are down there for tomorrow. I do a lot more in here in the wintertime, inside the bayou.
Okay.
But
Over by the campground.
yeah, more in the wintertime. But right now, if I was going out there, this is the pass right here. Maximum moving water, maximum oxygen.
Okay.
So if you're doing that over there, it'd be trout, flounder, ladyfish, maybe even a mackerel.
Okay. Cool.
I'm thinking how this is, you know, where's the tier of Verde Marina? Is it gonna be like,
Way.
it's gonna be
Yeah.
a pier, so it's further
Right
down.
here.
Okay, because that's where I was at fishing, catching the trout, was like right there. I launched right here, I got off, it was like a little sandy area right here. And I
Yeah.
launched here and just went across where the bridge area was out, just, you know, just fishing right in here.
Yeah.
I was catching trout in here. But you're saying keep on going.
There's all kinds of opportunities. I mean, you could go all the way out here and go to East Beach, the circular turnaround here. You could go out here. You could go out here.
If you don't want to pay 35 cents toll, there's a little cut through the mangroves in here, like you were talking about, little access points. where
Your
people-
problem with that is if you have a low tide, it's a long sloggy walk through the mud. If you launch right by the bridge, no matter what the tide is, it's a short distance to the
I
car.
think it's high tide at 5 something. All right.